somebody at GSA had proposed leveraging the government's buying power to get discount airfares, which I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. Let me take it on. So long story short, I did all this stuff and I put together a project plan, presented it to the assistant director for management, and he gave me permission to proceed. So we did the implementation and it was successful. As I think back on it, there were a lot of significant lessons that I carried with me. The first is the importance of identifying key stakeholders and how those stakeholders can be most productively engaged in the reform process, starting with identifying the problems, what the desired project outcomes are, measured and expressed in measurable ways, and the best ways of achieving those outcomes. And I cannot overstate the importance of doing this well, identifying the right people. And so for this project, the stakeholders were organizations or people who had the authority to make the changes needed to achieve the desired outcomes. To summarize, stakeholders create the conditions within which organizations operate. And the asset management term for that is the context of the organization. So now going back to the high level lessons for successful projects, you need to have a project plan that involves the stakeholders in the tasks that are most important to them and that monitors their involvement in the task. You have to have tools needed to communicate the desired outcomes and ways of achieving them to the people responsible for achieving the outcomes and to the authorities that create those tools. You have to have great communications across all the different players. So that at a very high level, that's the view of the lessons I had learned about how to conduct successful management reform efforts by the time I retired from federal service in 2013. A year and a half after I retired, I had the opportunity to meet Jim Dieter and Jack Dempsey. GSA invited me to come over. People from GSA's Office of Government-Wide Policy invited me to come over to listen to a proposal by Jim and Jack about an executive order that they had written that would have required federal agencies to adopt asset management. And I listened, and they talked about this ISO 55000. I'd never heard of it. Of course, ISO 55000 came out in 2014. That was the year after I retired. So I was able to get a hold of a copy of the standard. And when I read it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is such great stuff. These principles are so, common sense and well thought out, and they cover a whole lot. They cover probably more than I had learned over my 42 years of work. So I was thrilled to learn about it. In fact, and then I thought, well, I think I'll join the ALN because I think this is something that is really powerful, and I want to be part of making it happen in the US.
Although it's a slower conversation when we talk about change management at an enterprise level or policy, I would submit there's been a lot of very positive feedback at senior levels across Department of Defense and throughout a number of civilian agencies. And then I think that story is also echoed on internationally. In fact, it was just this week, I've talked to 3 different professionals who are leading asset management activities of 3 different countries, South Africa, Morocco, and the UK, who are challenged with exactly the same problem. So there's a lot of people, and I think a growing kind of chorus that is understanding this problem and trying to and advocate for changes there.
I believe that the most important step for improving asset management in this country, and probably any other country through public policy, is creating a set of expectations for good asset management and holding the key government stakeholders accountable for achieving those expectations.